Hey there, I'm Bailey and welcome to my channel where we discuss all the tips and tricks necessary for you to live a life of adventure. If you are thinking of planning a thru hike of the Great Divide Trail and are just feeling really overwhelmed about all of the permits needed to hike through the national parks, then you are in the right place. I thru hiked the Great Divide Trail back in 2019 with my buddy Quill, and to be honest, the permit system is just such a huge headache. So I'm hoping to kind of dispel some of that for people, make it a little bit more clear, especially for those of us that are not from Canada and are not familiar with the permit system used there. So I do want to say that this is going to be part of a 2 to 3 part series on permits. So this is just talking about the different kinds of campsites that you'll find along the Great Divide Trail, which ones may require permits and what sorts of permits go with those. And I'll have videos following up on this talking about what sort of fees you pay for your different permits and when the registration windows are and other information. So if you want to be the first to know when those videos come out to help you plan your Great Divide Trail thru hike, then you might want to consider subscribing to this channel. So one of the biggest resources for prospective GDT thru hikers are the permit planning resources on the Great Divide Trail Association website. This is what Quill and I use to plan our GDT thru hike, especially the permit part. And this is the information that honestly is just super helpful when you're trying to think of things on the big scope. If you don't know already, then I'm sorry to clue you in that unfortunately, the GDT does not have like a thru hiker permit like you would find on the PCT, so you have to buy all of your permits individually. Fortunately, not all campsites require permit, and so the first kind of campsite that the GDTA talks about that you will find in Canada would be your flat spot suitable for camping campsite. So this is really just your campsite where you can roll in, pick any spot that you want, plop your tent down, and you are good to go for the night. This is really mostly what you will find in sections A and B, so that would be from the border to Peter Lougheed Provincial Park. You know, it's a lot more wild. You're not in the national parks other than Waterton in that section, and it just honestly feels more remote as far as seeing a lot less people and definitely a lot less maintained. There are some sections where you'll find some of these really wild, rather primitive areas that do require some sort of permit, usually the random camping permit through Parks Canada, but that would just be mostly in section D, F, and G, as well as 1 or 2 spots in the beginning of section E. Now this really is more what most of you American thru hikers are going to be used to, especially if you've done things like the PCT and the CDT, where it's pretty much just, you know, pretty rugged, go camp wherever you want, not established at all. But if you're someone that's used to established campsites, then just know, you know, to follow your normal leave no trace, try not to impact the environment, that kind of thing. Now, if you are checking out the permit planning resource on the GDTA, which I will definitely link down in the description below, then you need to know that these sites that are basically not established campsites at all are marked with a number 4, and you're basically not going to have any sort of amenities at these sites, right? Like no outhouses, no fire rings, nothing like that, because they're not a site at all, really. It's just you camping. So the second type of campsite that you will find when you're backcountry camping on the Great Divide Trail would be your primitive backcountry sites. So these are sites that are somewhat maintained by Parks Canada, but they don't really offer very many amenities. It's marked with a number 3 on their trip planning resources PDF, and you will primarily find them in the beginning and the end of the trail, rather than in the more well-traveled sections like the Rock Wall, Skyline, Egypt Lakes kind of area, you know, the well-traveled parts of the national parks. That's not really going to be the case, but definitely in some of the provincial parks and the less traveled areas of the national parks is where you'll kind of find these campgrounds where either Parks Canada is not really maintaining them anymore, or it's just a basic pad with a sign that says it's a campground, but there's not really any other amenities in that area. Typically, these campsites require a random camping permit. So again, that's Parks Canada's version of a backcountry permit. That's just kind of a catch-all. So you do need to pay for the permit, but you can choose to camp wherever you want. You're not like locked into a specific site when you get a random camping permit. Again, if you're wondering which sites require a random camping permit and which primitive sites don't, then definitely, again, check out that trip planning resource linked below. So the third type of site that you will find on the GDT would be your developed backcountry sites. And I apologize because I kind of went in the wrong order here, but this is going to be your number 2 on the trip planning resource. So these are your sites that are well developed. You know, even though you have to hike in to get to them, they're hard to access as far as like access to roads and stuff, that they have a ton of resources and they're just really nice to stay at. And if you have done a lot of hiking in the West, then you will be pleasantly surprised. I know Cole and I were really excited when we found out that we had bear lockers at all these campsites. There's an outhouse at all of them. Often there's a cooking area with like picnic tables, as well as camp pads at a lot of them too. So there really are very nice campsites. You're really paying for a lot, and you typically find these in the more well-traveled areas. So specifically Mount Assiniboine, like Lake Og and Magog campgrounds. Definitely on the Rockwall Trail in Banff and the Egypt Lakes area, as well as the Skyline Trail in Jasper. There's other areas as well. If you choose to do the Quintonoc alternate, definitely along the Iceline Trail, you'll find these kind of campsites, and also down in some of the other provincial parks along the way. So because these are nicer sites, and they're usually, nice scenery, they're also usually pretty popular. And because of that, you typically need a specific backcountry permit for the site you want to stay at. So say you want to stay at Lake Magog at Mount Assiniboine, then you need to, ahead of time, get a reservation that is saying that you want a site pad at that campground on a specific day, which can be really difficult when you're planning a thru hike for sure. So you definitely need to keep that in mind and know that ahead of time if you're considering hiking the Great Divide Trail or working on your trip planning. There are some of these developed backcountry sites that don't require a reservation ahead of time. One that definitely comes to mind is the Elk Lakes Provincial Park campground. That's right before you get to Peter Lougheed if you're heading northbound. And that one is a really nice campground that you can just pay at a station and pay for the site. There are also some that are free, but by and large, the majority of them either need a backcountry permit or, if they don't need that, then you definitely need a random camping permit. So definitely keep that in mind and look for those when you're planning. You'll mostly find those in the national park as well as in 3 different provincial parks. And so the provincial parks that you need to look out for are Mount Assiniboine, Peter Lougheed, and Mount Robson provincial parks. So the last type of campsite that you will find on the Great Divide Trail are front country campsites. So these would be more of your like drive-in campsites or established campgrounds. Now the majority of these are going to be in your national parks. So when you hike into Waterton, especially if you start on the US side and hike through, then there's a huge campground at Waterton. This is also great if you are going to Banff or Jasper to resupply and you don't want to pay for a hostel. You can stay at the campground, so some of those are listed. There are some other campgrounds that are front country campgrounds along the way, specifically like the Lynx Creek campground and the Castle Creek Provincial Park, as well as some of the sites in Kananaskis country. So they're out there, but they're definitely a lot less common, especially just because the GDT is pretty rugged and remote. You're usually not along a lot of roads where people are camping. But there are a few that you can find along the way. So again, this is just kind of a taste of everything that goes into permit planning and just kind of lets you know the different sites that are out there, because it is definitely different than backpacking in the US or thru hiking in the US. And I definitely would encourage you to, again, check out that GDTA trip planning resource that's down in the description for this video. And also, if you have any specific questions about my experience, I'd be more than happy to share it. Just drop me a question down in the comments below. So if you found this video to be helpful, I'd greatly appreciate a thumbs up. That just lets me know I should keep making more videos just like this. And I hope you guys have a great time planning your GDT thru hike and that this has been helpful. And I will see you guys in the next video when it comes out.